human resource forecasting means it's a process of planning for future demand or future requirements of a human resource in the right quality and right numbers. In order to provide those employees, we are going to estimate the availability of the human resource in the organization. Modern techniques will reduce the manpower. So based on the technique, what we use for the production will influence for the human resource requirement. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to one and all. I am Meghana from the Department of Commerce, lecturing in Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence. We are in the session 2 of Unit 2, subject Human Resource Management. In the last session, we have discussed about the human resource planning. What is human resource planning? Needs and importance of human resource planning and the process of human resource planning. In today's session, let us discuss with the HR demand forecasting and HR supply forecasting. So, what do you mean by HR demand forecasting? So, HR demand forecasting is the process of estimating the future human resource requirement. So, you are going to estimate the future human resource requirement in a right quality and right number. So, this quality, the skills and knowledge required to perform a particular job, then right number. So, number of employees required to perform those projects. So, here you are going to plan for the future. So, requirement for future. So, in order to predict, in order to forecast the human resource demand, you need to analyze the various factors. So, human resource forecasting means it's a process of planning for future demand or future requirements of a human resource in the right quality and right number. So that now, if the organization plans, then now you know the requirement for future. So, we can arrange for the alternatives or you can take the necessary decision for the employment. So, you can take the employment action. So, either you may recruit the employee through various factors, through internal or external source. So, you can take the action with the help of this human resource demand forecasting. So, what are the factors which influence the demand forecasting? So, the various factors which influence. So, due to all these factors, you need to predict for the future requirements. So, what are those factors? So, first one is employment trends. So, changing according to the technology. So, changes in the technology, it requires the new skills and knowledge. So, based on the changes in trends or changes in employment trends, you need to predict for the future demands. Next one, replacement needs. So, replacement needs, it may be for retirement or it may be for death, or the employee may get better option, or because if the employee quits the job, for all this reason, you need to replace the existing employee. Next one, productivity. In order to increase your productivity, you need to recruit the employees. Next one, absenteeism. So, absenteeism, it influences on the human resource requirement. Next, last one, expansion and growth. For the expansion and growth, organization requires more number of employees. For the expansion and growth, you need to recruit the employee. All these factors will influence for your human resource demand forecasting. So then, what are the techniques which we use for the demand forecasting? So those techniques are managerial technique, work study technique, ratio trend analysis, econometric techniques, Delphi techniques and other techniques. So let us discuss one by one. So first consider managerial technique. So here under managerial technique, you are going to analyze, you are going to evaluate the existing employees and you are going to predict for the future. Under managerial technique, we are going to predict the requirement for the future in a 2-step. So, first one is a top-down approach. First one is top-down approach. Second one is bottom-up approach. So here, under first technique, the top management is going to predict the number of employees required for all the departments. So here, they will consider all the department wise, manufacturing, HR, sales, marketing, and finance. So various departments. So they are going to forecast for the all the departments, so that overall requirement for the human resource. So this is for whole organization. So then they make a list for the respective department. For example, for the manufacturing departments, so they predict 200 employees are required. So their forecast. Then for the HR department, 100 employee. For the sales, 300. Then for the finance, 100 employees. So they are going to predict for each and every department. So top management, they are going to predict for overall organization. Then after listing out for a particular department, they are going to send that list to the respective department. So this list will send to the respective department manager. So here manufacturing department will get this list and they are going to analyze whether 200 employees are needed or 200 employees are enough to perform the future projects or not. So they are going to evaluate that. Then they will give the opinion to the top management. Based on this list, they are going to give their opinion for the top management. So considering this, they are going to make a decision. So they are going to make a decision about employment action. So under top-down approach, top management is going to predict or is going to forecast for the human resource for a overall organization. So for the respective department wise, they are going to predict. So under bottom-up approach, the management give chance for the respective department. Here, manufacturing department, the department head or department manager is going to predict or they are going to analyze and forecast the demand for the future. So here the manufacturing department, they predict that they require 250 employees are required for the future. And finance, they predict that 125 employees are required. Then sales, they predict that they require 200 employees. So here the respective department manager is going to predict the human resource requirement for the future and they are going to send this list to the top management. So based on that, they are going to analyze this, then they will make a decision about this employment action. So based on this analysis, they are going to predict for the overall as well as for the department wise recruitment. So here under managerial judgment, we are going to analyze, we are going to forecast the human resource under two approach, top-down approach and bottom-up approach. So that is managerial judgment. Next one, work study technique. It's also known as work study analysis. So under this technique, the management, they are going to predict the human resource based on the estimated outcome or the productivity or total number of units to be produced. Here they will consider total number of units to be produced in a particular year and the ability, individual ability or the time required to produce each unit. So we can explain this technique through one example. So consider the organization, the total number of units to be produced in a particular year is 3 lakh units. So their intention is to produce 3 lakh units in next year. So in order to produce 1 unit, it requires 2 hours. So it requires 2 hours to produce 1 unit. So total we require 2 into 3, that is 6 lakh hours. 6 lakh hours to produce 3 lakh units. So through the past experience, they can predict that individual can contribute up to 1,500 hours per year. So now we can calculate the number of employees required to perform a particular job. So 6 lakh divided by 1,500. So we require 6 lakh hours. So individual, one employee can contribute up to 1,500 hours. So how many employees are required to perform or to produce this 3 lakh units? So 6 lakh divided by 1,500, we get 400. So that is, we require 400 employees to produce 3 lakh units. So now we take this number and we are going to analyze and we are going to predict for the future. So through this, we can predict. So for the future project, we need 400 employee. So that is work study technique. So next one, ratio trend analysis. So here we can forecast the human resource requirement based on the individual productivity. For example, here one employee can produce 200 units. So individual ability or the standard number of units for a one individual or one employee. So here one individual can produce 200 units. The total output or the total number of units to be produced is 1,40,000. So now the organization has to produce 1,40,000 units. One individual can produce 200 units. So now you can forecast human resource requirement. So it shows that 700 employees are required in order to produce 1,40,000 units. So through this calculation, ratio trend analysis helps the organization to predict or to forecast the human resource requirement based on the ratio, productivity ratio or productivity level. Here the individual productivity level is 1:200. Based on that ratio, we can predict, we can forecast the human resource requirement for the future. So that is ratio trend analysis. Next one, econometric model. Under this model, we are going to establish a relationship between dependent variable and independent variable. So just consider sales, production, then HR means human resource, that is manpower. So in this, just identify which is the dependent variable and independent variable. Here the sales and productions are independent variable and this human resource and manpower are dependent variable. Here this human resource or the manpower will depend on this independent variable, that is sales or production. So based on the sales, number of units to be sold as well as number of units to be produced, you are going to recruit the employee or you are going to use the manpower. So here it is a dependent variable and independent variable. So here under econometric model, we are going to establish a relationship between this independent and dependent variable in order to predict the human resource requirement. That means you are going to first consider the independent variable. So the number of the sales units or the number of units to be produced for the future project. Then you will consider the dependent variable. You are going to predict for the dependent variable. Based on the sales or the number of units to be produced, you are going to predict the human resource requirements. So considering their ability and the standard time or this ratio, we are going to predict the human resource requirement. So under econometric, we are going to establish a relationship between two variables. So next one, Delphi model. Under Delphi model, we are going to collect the opinions from this experts. So considering various factors, abilities and needs and responses. So considering all these factors, we are going to collect opinion from group of experts. This process will continue until all the experts will agree with that report. So until all the group members or all the group experts should agree with that report. So until that, this process will continue. So considering all this factor, they are going to make a list. So they are going to predict for the human resource requirement. Here we consider expert opinion. So last one, other techniques. What are the other techniques apart from this 5 techniques? Those techniques are organizational cum succession plan. Through the organizational cum succession plan, we can predict the human resource requirement for future. Estimation based on the techniques of production. So what are the techniques which we use for the production process? Modern techniques will reduce the manpower. So based on the technique, what we use for the production will influence for the human resource requirement. So that is one of the factors. Then estimation on the basis of past records. So through the last records or past experience, we can predict the human resource requirement. These all are the other techniques. So under techniques of human resource demand forecasting, we have totally 5+1 technique. So this is all about techniques of HR demand forecasting. Moving further, HR supply forecasting. So now we know demand forecast. Demand forecasting means it is a process of planning for future requirement of a human resource in a right quality and right number. So what do you mean by supply forecasting? Human resource supply forecasting is a process of estimating availability of human resources, which is followed by demand forecasting. Based on the demand, we are going to predict or we are going to estimate the availability of human resource. While we discussing about the demand forecasting, under this technique, we are going to calculate number of employees required to perform the job. Now here we identify the requirement. So under supply forecasting, we are going to estimate. So what is the existing employees, availability of the current employee. So we are going to estimate, we are going to evaluate the existing employee with the requirement. So in order to supply, in order to provide those employees, we are going to estimate the availability of the human resource in the organization. For forecasting supply of human resource, we need to consider internal supply and external supply of human resource. So you can supply or you can fulfill the requirement either through internal source or through external source. So these all are the two forms we can fulfill the requirements. So first we need to consider the internal source, current availability of manpower, that is human resource. Then for the gap, to fill the gap, we will go for the external source. So internal supply of human resource available by way of transfer, through the transfer, promotion, retired employees and recall of laid off employees. Through all these factors, we can fulfill the requirements. So all these are the internal source. Through the internal source in the form of transfer, promotion, retired employees and recall of laid off employees. Through this process, we can fulfill the requirements. Then for the external supply, the availability of labor force in the market, then by way of new recruitment. So the considering availability of employees, labor in the market, then we will go for the recruitment process. For the external source, we are going to appoint or we are going to recruit the fresh employees or new employees for the organization. First, we will consider the internal source. Then in order to fill the gap, for example, so the requirement is 400. You can fill up to 300 employee from internal source. So now find the difference, 100. In order to fill this 100, you will go for external source. So that is human resource supply forecasting. This is all about today's session. Let us meet in the next session with some more topic. Until then, keep watching. Thank you.